Hello, and welcome. I'm glad you've decided to spend the next few minutes improving your English while exploring one of the world's most fascinating events, the Football World Cup. Now, before we begin, let me ask you a simple question. What comes to your mind when you hear the words World Cup? Perhaps you imagine a packed stadium filled with passionate supporters. Maybe you think of children playing football in the streets, pretending to score the winning goal. Or perhaps you remember a particular match that made you laugh, celebrate, or even cry. Whatever your answer may be, there is one thing we can all agree on. The World Cup is much more than a football tournament. Every 4 years, something extraordinary happens. For a few weeks, billions of people from different cultures, languages, and backgrounds focus on the same event. Families gather around television screens. Friends stay awake until late at night. Cafes become crowded. Social media fills with excitement, predictions, celebrations, and disappointment. Even people who rarely watch football suddenly become interested. But have you ever wondered why? Why does a simple game have such an enormous impact on people across the globe? Today's conversation is not really about football itself. Instead, it's about people. Football simply provides the stage. The real story is about hope, ambition, fear, resilience, and the universal desire to achieve something meaningful. Think about this for a moment. A football match lasts only 90 minutes. Yet those 90 minutes can become unforgettable memories that stay with people for decades. That seems almost unbelievable, doesn't it? The answer lies in something psychologists often discuss. Human beings naturally love stories. Every World Cup creates thousands of stories. There is the story of the underdog, a team that nobody expects to succeed but somehow defeats stronger opponents. There is the story of redemption, where a player who once made a terrible mistake returns years later and proves everyone wrong. Then there are stories of heartbreak, where one missed penalty changes the emotions of an entire nation. These stories keep us emotionally invested. We are not simply watching 22 athletes chase a ball. We are watching dreams collide. And dreams are something every person can understand, regardless of nationality. Another fascinating aspect of the World Cup is uncertainty. In everyday life, we often seek certainty. We want predictable routines. We want plans that work exactly as expected. But sport refuses to offer guarantees. The strongest team does not always win. The biggest star does not always score. Sometimes, a single unexpected moment changes everything. That uncertainty creates excitement. It reminds us that life itself is unpredictable. No matter how carefully we prepare, surprises are inevitable. Perhaps that is one reason people feel emotionally connected to football. It reflects reality. Preparation matters. Talent matters. Experience matters. But none of those things can eliminate uncertainty. Now imagine standing on the pitch just before the final begins. The stadium is full. Millions of people are watching around the world. Your country's flag is flying proudly above thousands of supporters. The national anthem begins to play. At that moment, what would you feel? Excitement? Fear? Confidence? Pressure? Probably all of them at the same time. Professional footballers often describe these moments as unforgettable. Years of training, sacrifice, discipline, and determination have brought them to a single match. One opportunity. One performance. One chance to leave their mark on history. Even if we never become professional athletes, we can relate to those emotions. Perhaps you've experienced something similar before an important examination, a job interview, a presentation, or a competition. The situation may have been different, but the feeling was remarkably similar. Your heart beat faster. Your hands became slightly cold. Your thoughts raced through your mind. That experience reminds us of an important truth. Pressure is not unique to athletes. Pressure is part of being human. And this is why football often becomes a metaphor for life. The lessons extend far beyond the stadium. Consider teamwork. Many people admire spectacular goals. However, beautiful goals rarely happen because of one individual alone. A successful attack usually begins much earlier. A defender wins possession. A midfielder notices an opportunity. Another player creates space by making an intelligent run. Several quick passes follow. Only then does someone score. Although the final touch receives the applause, success often depends on invisible contributions. Isn't that similar to everyday life? Behind every successful business, scientific discovery, or artistic achievement, there are countless people whose efforts remain unnoticed. Success is rarely the result of a single individual. It is usually the product of cooperation. This idea becomes especially clear during the World Cup because every player represents something larger than themselves. They are not only playing for personal glory. They are representing teammates, coaches, families, supporters, and sometimes an entire generation that dreams of witnessing history. That responsibility can feel incredibly heavy. Yet it can also become a powerful source of motivation. Another reason the World Cup fascinates so many people is that it temporarily removes social barriers. For a brief period, people who would normally have very little in common begin sharing conversations. A university professor and a taxi driver might discuss the same match. A child and a grandparent may celebrate the same goal. Strangers exchange opinions while waiting for a train. Football becomes a common language. You don't need perfect grammar to understand the joy of a dramatic victory. You don't need to speak the same native language to recognize genuine excitement. Sometimes, a smile, a cheer, or a disappointed sigh communicates more effectively than words ever could. That ability to connect people is surprisingly powerful. In an increasingly divided world, moments of shared emotion are becoming more valuable than ever. Of course, football also reminds us of something we often forget. Winning is temporary. Every champion eventually loses. Every great team eventually changes. Every legendary player eventually retires. Time never stops moving. At first, this idea may sound rather sad. But perhaps it is actually encouraging. Because if success is temporary, then failure is temporary as well. One disappointing result does not define an entire career. One mistake does not determine an entire future. History repeatedly shows that some of football's greatest players experienced painful defeats before achieving remarkable success. The same principle applies beyond sport. Failure is not always the opposite of success. Very often, it becomes part of the journey toward success. As we continue today's conversation, we'll look beyond famous goals and unforgettable matches. Instead, we'll explore confidence, leadership, resilience, communication, and the psychology behind performing under pressure. Because in many ways, the World Cup isn't simply about discovering the best football team on earth. It's about discovering what human beings are capable of when talent, preparation, courage, and opportunity come together. And perhaps, somewhere within those stories, we'll discover something about ourselves as well. So, take a deep breath, relax, and let's continue our journey together.